In the dying glow of a blood-red sunset that set the immaculate lawns and sleek facades of our upscale suburban enclave ablaze with an almost otherworldly radiance, I found myself irresistibly drawn into a labyrinth of silent whispers and hidden ambitions that belied the pristine exterior of our community. A place where every meticulously trimmed hedge and flawlessly paved driveway masked the turbulent undercurrents of power, secrecy, and unspoken despair that pulsed beneath the surface like a forbidden heartbeat. And it was on that unforgettable evening, as the horizon burned with the promise of both beauty and peril, that I first encountered Karen, the formidable matriarch of our homeowners association, whose very presence commanded a mixture of awe and trepidation. For she was as much a symbol of the community's rigid insistence on order as she was an enigmatic figure whose perfectly coiffed hair and steely eyes betrayed a soul scarred by the relentless demands of perfection, a perfection that left little room for the messy realities of human emotion. As I strolled along the winding, lamplit sidewalks that curved gracefully around opulent mansions and secret gardens, my mind teemed with questions and quiet observations, each step echoing with the silent curiosity of a newcomer determined to peel back the layers of superficial charm to reveal the raw truths hidden beneath. And in that reflective solitude, I began to perceive the unsettling duality of our surroundings, a place where the enforced harmony of the HOA's strict rules coexisted uneasily with the simmering discontent of residents who, like myself, harbored private rebellions and dreams that dared to challenge the suffocating boundaries of conformity. A realization that struck me with the force of a revelation as I recalled a hushed conversation overheard between two elderly neighbors on a cool autumn evening, when one, his voice quavering with the weight of long-held secrets, remarked, "In this neighborhood, every smile is a mask and every well-tended garden hides a tale of regret," words that resonated deeply with the disquiet I felt as I contemplated the paradox of such controlled beauty. It was during one of these reflective walks that I first beheld Karen standing regally beside her famed greenhouse, a structure of glass and steel that shimmered like a mirage against the twilight sky, its reflective surfaces hinting at the verdant paradise concealed within, yet also casting distorted images of a reality that was as unnerving as it was enchanting. And even as the other residents whispered reverently about the miraculous bounty of her botanical sanctuary, I sensed an undercurrent of dark irony. For beneath the carefully curated exterior lay secrets that would soon unravel into a tale of deception and retribution, a tale that began to take shape in the recesses of my mind as I observed Karen's every calculated gesture, the way her eyes narrowed ever so slightly when she thought no one was watching, and the controlled inflection in her voice when she engaged in brief, clipped exchanges with those unfortunate enough to cross her path. Indeed, it was as if Karen herself had become the embodiment of the community's contradictions. A woman who wielded authority like a finely honed blade, yet whose every interaction hinted at an inner turmoil born of isolation and the crushing pressure of upholding an image that was as much a prison as it was a proclamation of power. And on one crisp evening, as I lingered near the edge of her domain, I heard her murmur softly to a passing neighbor, "Every rule we live by is both our protection and our damnation," a statement delivered in a tone that was both resigned and fiercely defiant, leaving me to wonder whether the impeccable order we so admired was nothing more than a brittle facade waiting to shatter under the weight of its own contradictions. As days turned into weeks and the rhythm of suburban life settled into a deceptively tranquil cadence, I became increasingly attuned to the subtle nuances of human behavior that animated our neighborhood, a place where polite greetings masked underlying tensions and every courteous nod concealed layers of distrust. And I found solace in the quiet moments of introspection on my back porch, where I would watch the lamplight dance upon the manicured gardens and imagine the countless stories of ambition, heartbreak, and quiet rebellion that had played out behind closed doors, each narrative intertwining with the next in a tapestry of human frailty and resilience. It was during one such evening that I struck up a brief yet illuminating conversation with Mr. Jenkins, a wizened resident whose lined face bore the marks of decades spent witnessing the rise and fall of suburban dreams. And with a gravelly voice that seemed to echo the wisdom of ages past, he confided, "This place may look like paradise, but every paradise has its price, and here we all pay in secrets and silent compromises," a remark that sent a shiver of both dread and fascination through my veins, prompting me to consider that perhaps the true essence of our community lay not in its outward splendor but in the hidden struggles and unspoken desires of those who lived within its borders. Karen, too, seemed to embody this duality. For while she was admired and even envied by many for her seemingly flawless success and her ability to command respect with a single glance, I could sense a profound loneliness behind those steely eyes, an isolation born of the relentless need to uphold an image that left no room for vulnerability or genuine connection. And in the rare moments when I caught her alone in the shadow of her greenhouse, the facade would slip ever so slightly, revealing fleeting glimpses of a woman burdened by the impossibility of living up to the ideals she so zealously enforced, a realization that struck me with both sympathy and a growing sense of foreboding about the costs of such uncompromising authority. As I continued my slow and deliberate exploration of this microcosm of American life, every interaction and whispered exchange seemed to reinforce the notion that beneath the surface of our picture-perfect suburb lay a network of hidden alliances, simmering resentments, and clandestine ambitions, a world where each resident, bound by the rigid expectations of the HOA, navigated a delicate dance of appearances and secrets, and where Karen, with her magnetic yet intimidating presence, served as both the arbiter and the reluctant victim of this unyielding system, a system that prized outward conformity above all else, even as it choked the very spirit of individuality and genuine human connection in this charged atmosphere. Even the light banter exchanged during chance encounters in the community center or while waiting in line at the local cafe carried with it an undercurrent of caution and unspoken acknowledgement of the delicate balance we all maintained between order and chaos. And it was in these fleeting moments of shared understanding that I began to truly grasp the psychological landscape of our neighborhood, a landscape where every smile hid a secret, every gesture carried the weight of unspoken expectations, and every resident, from the seemingly ordinary to the overtly domineering, struggled silently with the tension between the persona they projected to the world and the raw, often painful, reality of their inner lives. And so, as the days gave way to nights and the community continued its ceaseless, rhythmical performance of civility and control, I found myself inexorably drawn into a narrative of contradictions and hidden truths. A narrative that was destined to unravel the meticulously woven fabric of suburban perfection and expose the human heart in all its messy, brilliant, and ultimately inescapable complexity, leaving me to wonder whether the price of such order was, in fact, the very soul of the people who called this place home. In the early hours of a humid summer evening, as I sat alone in the quiet solitude of my modest living room, the digital glare of my electricity bill on the screen ignited in me a spark of both confusion and disquiet. A spark that soon blossomed into a full-blown conflagration of suspicion and dread as I noted, with mounting alarm, that the amount displayed was inexplicably astronomical compared to the measured, almost ritualistic consumption I had maintained over the past months. And though at first I attributed this aberration to a mere clerical error or a momentary glitch in the system, a deeper, more insidious realization began to take shape within the labyrinth of my thoughts, for the numbers, stark and unyielding, refused to be dismissed by rational explanation, thereby compelling me to embark upon a meticulous inquiry that would unravel not only the technical intricacies of an illicit siphoning of power but also the hidden undercurrents of betrayal that had, until now, lurked in the shadows of our seemingly immaculate suburban paradise. It was during one of these restless nights, when the world outside was cloaked in darkness and the only company I had was the persistent hum of the cooling fan and the distant echoes of nocturnal life, that I resolved to trace the origin of the anomaly, guided by an inner voice that was equal parts trepidation and determination. And as I began a careful examination of the wiring behind the innocuous veneer of my home's living room wall, I discovered, much to my dismay, a thin, almost imperceptible cable that deviated from the standard blueprint of our community's electrical grid. A cable that appeared to stretch its clandestine tendrils from my very own domain into the realm of an adjacent property, a property that belonged to none other than Karen, the formidable matriarch of our homeowners association, whose lavish greenhouse, reputed throughout the neighborhood for its lush, verdant splendor and exotic botanical wonders, had long been the subject of hushed admiration and covert envy among the residents. And as I followed the subtle trail of this hidden conduit, my heart pounded with the intensity of 1,000 unspoken questions, while my mind raced to piece together the mosaic of circumstantial evidence that now pointed unerringly towards a deliberate act of electrical thievery. For it was not merely a case of an errant wire or a benign installation error, but rather a carefully orchestrated operation executed with an audacity that defied the norms of communal ethics and legal propriety, one in which Karen, whose reputation for uncompromising authority and icy efficiency had often bordered on the tyrannical, had covertly rechanneled energy from unsuspecting neighbors like myself to fuel the insatiable demands of her self-styled green haven, a haven that, despite its outward allure and the shimmering promise of a sustainable, nature-infused sanctuary, concealed within its glass walls a labyrinth of subterfuge and deceit. Indeed, as I scrutinized the cable further, its discrete connection to an array of mysterious, makeshift electrical devices and hastily executed repairs, each a silent testament to a well-conceived plan of misappropriation, became unmistakably clear, and in that moment, I recalled a conversation I had once overheard in the dimly lit corridor of our community center, where a soft-spoken elderly gentleman, his voice trembling with the weight of unspoken truths, had murmured to a passing neighbor, "In this neighborhood, even the lights can hide the darkest secrets," a remark that now resonated with a chilling clarity as the evidence before me unfolded in a steady cascade of incontrovertible facts. Propelled by a mixture of indignation and a desperate need to reclaim not only the electricity that was rightfully mine but also the sanctity of our shared living space, I initiated a series of covert observations. Armed with little more than a digital camera and an unyielding resolve, and over the course of several restless nights, I meticulously documented every anomalous detail, from the peculiar behavior of circuit breakers that seemed to trip at inopportune moments to the sporadic, almost rhythmic flickering of lights that danced in tandem with the nocturnal whispers of the wind, and all the while, a gnawing sense of betrayal grew within me, intertwining with a profound loneliness that seemed to echo the isolation of a soul adrift in a sea of regulated perfection. As my investigation deepened, I found that the cable, its insulated sheath marred by subtle signs of tampering, led inexorably to the perimeter of Karen's property, where, hidden behind a meticulously manicured hedge and shielded by layers of decorative stone, lay the imposing structure of her greenhouse, its transparent walls reflecting not only the soft luminescence of the moonlight but also the darker undercurrents of a scheme so brazen in its execution that it defied both logic and decency. And it was in this very setting, where the lush vibrancy of exotic flora stood in stark contrast to the sterile precision of engineered order, that I began to discern the full extent of the deceit, for I noticed, with a mounting sense of both horror and fascination, a series of incongruous repair works and technical modifications that had been hastily and poorly integrated into the existing infrastructure. Modifications that bore all the hallmarks of an operation designed not for the benefit of communal efficiency but for the singular, self-serving ambition of one individual. And as I pieced together the fragmented evidence, my thoughts oscillated between disbelief and a fervent need for retribution. For I realized that the surreptitious diversion of energy was not a mere technical anomaly but a symbolic assault on the very principles of fairness and mutual respect that underpinned our community. A community now rendered vulnerable by the very system it had entrusted to figures of authority like Karen, whose once sterling reputation was now irrevocably tarnished by the revelation of her covert misdeeds. In a moment of introspective clarity, as I stood before the silent conduit that had so brazenly connected my home to that forbidden bastion of green excess, I felt a deep, unsettling kinship with the electricity itself, a force that, in its raw, unbridled form, sought to break free of the confines of its designated path and, in doing so, exposed the fragility of human constructs and the ease with which even the most carefully curated facades could be subverted, so that, with each pulse of the stolen current, a narrative of exploitation and moral decay was written anew. A narrative that threatened to shatter the delicate equilibrium of trust that had long been the foundation of our suburban idyll. And as I continued to trace the cable's clandestine journey, my mind teeming with a maelstrom of emotions ranging from righteous anger to a sorrowful lament for the lost innocence of our community, I could not help but feel that I had stumbled upon a far greater mystery than a mere spike in my utility bill, one that spoke to the very heart of a societal malaise in which the unchecked hunger for power, both literal and metaphorical, had begun to erode the bonds of neighborly kinship, leaving in its wake a trail of silent betrayals and electrical anomalies that demanded to be exposed, not merely as a technical glitch, but as a profound commentary on the insidious ways in which human ambition could corrupt even the most essential aspects of our modern existence. And so, with a final, resolute glance at the hidden cable, a lifeline of misappropriated energy that pulsed like a dark artery beneath the veneer of suburban normalcy, I vowed to unearth every last detail of this elaborate subterfuge, to confront the forces that had dared to manipulate the sacred flow of power for personal gain, and to restore, however imperfectly, the trust that had been shattered by this audacious theft, all the while recognizing that the journey ahead would not only challenge my technical acumen but would also force me to grapple with the deepest recesses of human emotion, where the interplay of greed, betrayal, and the relentless quest for control coalesced into a single, unyielding truth that in our modern world, even the most fundamental elements of life, like the very electricity that lit our nights and powered our dreams, could be hijacked by the hands of those who sought to redefine paradise in their own image. Under the oppressive weight of a moonlit night and the silent, accusing glow of hidden cameras discreetly affixed to the eaves of unsuspecting homes, I embarked on a painstaking investigation into the electrical anomaly that had so disturbed the fragile equilibrium of our suburban idyll. My hands trembling not only from the chill of the evening air but from the gravity of the betrayal I was about to unveil, for every careful click of a camera's shutter and every whispered note into my recorder served as a defiant act of reclamation against a system that had long masked its insidious undercurrents beneath the veneer of pristine lawns and immaculate facades. And as I silently documented the labyrinthine pathways of stolen energy, my mind became an unrelenting storm of suspicion and dread that swirled around the enigmatic figure of Karen, the imperious matriarch of our homeowners association, whose impeccably maintained greenhouse, a dazzling citadel of glass and verdant mystery, had become the unwitting stage for an elaborate network of criminal subterfuge. For it was not merely a botanical retreat but a hub from which a shadowy cabal of high-ranking community members orchestrated an illegal gambling enterprise powered by the very electricity siphoned from the unsuspecting residents of our neighborhood. Every time I adjusted the angle of a camera lens or secretly rewired a connection to capture fleeting images of clandestine meetings in dimly lit corridors, I felt the weight of responsibility, as though the very soul of our community rested on my ability to reveal the truth hidden behind Karen's flawless exterior. And in the depths of those long, sleepless nights, when the only company I had was the rhythmic hum of a distant transformer and the soft, almost imperceptible whispers of the wind threading through the trees, I began to piece together a tapestry of deception that stretched far beyond a mere misappropriation of power. Each flickering shadow on the wall, each stray snippet of conversation recorded in hurried, clandestine moments, served as a testament to a conspiracy that had corroded the foundations of trust upon which our suburban paradise had been built. Indeed, one night as I crouched in the overgrown shrubbery adjacent to Karen's property, my heart pounding in unison with the steady cadence of stolen current, I overheard a terse exchange between two figures cloaked in the anonymity of darkness. Their voices, low and urgent as one remarked, "If Karen ever learns we're under surveillance, it'll unravel everything." To which the other replied, "We've come too far to turn back now." And these fragmented words echoed in my mind like a death knell for the carefully constructed order that had once seemed inviolable, for they hinted at a broader conspiracy in which the manipulation of power was not an isolated transgression but part of a systemic corruption involving those who were entrusted with safeguarding the community's interests. And as the days bled into nights, my investigation assumed the contours of a perilous odyssey. A journey that led me through the shadowy underbelly of a neighborhood that, by daylight, wore the mask of decorum and civility, but by night revealed a theater of clandestine operations, where the theft of electricity was but one facet of a more nefarious plot designed to enrich a select few at the expense of the many. Each piece of evidence I gathered, from the discreetly installed camera footage capturing furtive glances and hurried footsteps, to the labyrinthine network of wires I meticulously traced from my own home to the hidden recesses of Karen's greenhouse, served not only as a record of criminal ingenuity, but as a stark reminder of the moral decay festering beneath the surface of our meticulously ordered lives. And though the act of surveilling my neighbors filled me with a palpable sense of guilt and isolation, an intrusion into the very privacy I once took for granted, it was a sacrifice I willingly bore in the hope of unmasking the truth and restoring a semblance of justice to a community that had long been suffocated by the duality of enforced perfection and secret transgression. Yet, as my silent vigil continued, I could not shake the growing awareness that I was not merely a lone dissident but a reluctant participant in a grander narrative of resistance, one that pitted the sanctity of individual rights against the all-encompassing authority of an institution that had, under the guise of communal harmony, allowed greed and corruption to seep into its very core. And with each passing night, as I reviewed the grainy footage and pieced together the disjointed clues like a frenzied detective in a noir thriller, a profound sense of inevitability took hold. A conviction that Karen, with all her steely resolve and ruthless efficiency, was merely the tip of an iceberg, a figurehead for a cabal of power brokers whose insatiable hunger for control had driven them to exploit not just the physical resources of our community, but the intangible trust that bound us together as neighbors. In one particularly charged moment, as I sat in the dim glow of my study, poring over the latest images that captured a heated conversation between Karen and a shadowy figure whose face was obscured by the darkness. I whispered to myself, "The deeper we dig, the darker it becomes." A sentiment that resonated deeply within me, for I knew that exposing the truth would not only disrupt the delicate equilibrium of our suburban life, but would also force each of us to confront the uncomfortable reality that behind the smiles and polite greetings lay a network of hidden agendas and suppressed resentments. And then, as if the very act of being observed had roused an ancient, primal instinct to defend her dominion, Karen herself began to display signs of acute awareness that she was no longer the untouchable figure of authority, for I observed in her furtive glances and sudden, sharp gestures a growing paranoia, a realization that the meticulous veneer of control she had so long maintained was beginning to crack under the weight of the evidence. And during a rare and unguarded moment when I managed to capture a candid conversation between her and a trusted confidant, I distinctly heard her murmur, "They're watching us, and if we're not careful, everything we've built will collapse like a house of cards." Statement that not only confirmed my suspicions but also underscored the internal schism that was rapidly emerging within the community, as neighbors who had once revered her authority began to question the integrity of the system they had so blindly trusted. In the ensuing days, as tension escalated to a palpable fever pitch and the once hushed corridors of our neighborhood became battlegrounds of silent accusations and furtive glances, I found myself caught in a maelstrom of conflicting emotions, part fear, part exhilaration. As the stakes of my investigation grew ever higher, for I was no longer simply a passive observer but an active participant in a dangerous game where the truth was the most potent and perilous currency, and every new piece of evidence threatened to ignite a conflagration that would not only expose the deep-seated corruption festering within our community, but also force each of us to confront the unsettling possibility that the very foundations of our lives were built upon a network of lies and compromises. As I continued to document the unfolding drama with a mix of grim determination and quiet desperation, I began to see the contours of a narrative that transcended the petty squabbles of individual grievances and spoke instead to a profound moral crisis, a crisis in which the relentless pursuit of power and profit had eroded the bonds of trust and common decency, leaving in its wake a community teetering on the brink of chaos. And it was in these dark hours, when the only light came from the cold, unyielding gaze of my cameras and the flickering images on my monitor, that I realized the true cost of our collective complicity. For each stolen kilowatt of power was not merely a technical violation but a symbolic rupture in the social contract that had once promised us safety and mutual respect. And so, with a heavy heart and a mind fraught with both dread and determination, I resolved to press on with my investigation, fully aware that the path ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty, yet driven by an unwavering belief that uncovering the truth, no matter how dark and disconcerting it might prove to be, was the only path to reclaiming the dignity and unity that had been so callously betrayed by those who, in their blind pursuit of control, had allowed the very lifeblood of our community to be diverted into the shadows of criminal enterprise, a diversion that now threatened not only the stability of our physical infrastructure but the fragile, intangible fabric of our collective humanity. Under the cold light of a dawning truth, after long nights of clandestine observation and a heavy buildup of unspoken fears that had slowly coalesced into a burning need for justice, the community, united by a shared sense of betrayal and resolute determination, finally gathered their collective courage and, armed with irrefutable evidence painstakingly amassed through secret nocturnal vigils and whispered confessions, presented the damning proof of Karen's insidious subterfuge to the authorities. And as the sound of sirens, piercing the stillness of our meticulously maintained suburban street like a clarion call of retribution, echoed through the night, a palpable shock rippled through the assembled neighbors, each heart pounding with both vindication and sorrow as uniformed officers, their expressions etched with a blend of stern professionalism and unspoken empathy, descended upon the scene, and in that moment as Karen, whose once commanding presence had masked a labyrinth of deceit and exploitation behind the polished veneer of her lush greenhouse, was abruptly apprehended and her wrists were secured in cold, unyielding handcuffs before the astonished eyes of our community. A scene of raw, unfiltered emotion unfolded that not only signified the collapse of a long-standing facade, but also laid bare the deep-rooted corruption that had silently festered within the very core of our homeowners association, and as murmurs of disbelief merged with the steady hum of flashing police lights and the distant rustle of wind through manicured hedges, I distinctly recalled the trembling voice of an elderly resident who, in a hushed yet resolute tone, confided to a trembling companion. "We have always known that beneath the surface of this so-called paradise lies a network of corruption, and tonight, we see the beginning of its unraveling." Words that resonated like an omen amid the chaos, for they encapsulated the bitter truth that Karen's arrest was merely the tip of an iceberg, a prelude to a far more intricate tapestry of fraudulent schemes and collusion involving other influential figures whose names had long been whispered in the corridors of power. And even as the officers escorted Karen away under the unyielding scrutiny of our collective gaze, her once imposing facade now replaced by a mixture of defiant resignation and palpable fear, a dark certainty gripped us all, that the meticulously maintained order of our suburban haven had been built on a foundation of hidden transgressions and silent compromises, and that each stolen kilowatt of electricity, each carefully concealed alteration to our shared infrastructure, had not only fueled a personal greed, but had also corroded the bonds of trust that had once united us. And in the heavy silence that followed, punctuated only by the soft murmur of voices steeped in regret and the steady tick of an indifferent clock, I found myself lost in a maelstrom of conflicting emotions, oscillating between righteous indignation for the blatant abuse of power and a profound melancholy for the community whose soul had been so callously undermined. And as I surveyed the scene, neighbors clustered in quiet groups, their eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and despair, and the fading echoes of the night's turmoil lingering like ghosts in the early light, I could not help but feel that this dramatic intervention, as shocking and cathartic as it was, merely marked the beginning of a long and arduous journey toward unmasking an even more expansive web of corruption that had ensnared those we once revered as the pillars of our community. For every furtive glance, every whispered conversation overheard in shadowed hallways in the weeks past, now served as a testament to a system where ambition had overstepped morality. And as I stood there, absorbing the gravity of the moment, a moment that forced each of us to confront our own complicity in a delicate dance of appearances and hidden agendas, I recalled the solemn words of another neighbor, whose voice wavered with both sorrow and steely resolve as he murmured, "This is just the beginning. Even now, as we see her taken away, we know that there are others behind the scenes, pulling the strings of this elaborate farce, and it is up to us to expose every last one of them." A statement that not only validated my deepest suspicions but also ignited a spark of hope. For it reminded us that in unity there lies the power to reclaim what had been so brutally stripped away, and as the first tentative rays of dawn began to dispel the long shadows of the night, casting a fragile glow upon the remnants of shattered trust and broken illusions, I realized that while Karen's arrest represented a moment of catharsis, a definitive crack in the armor of systemic deceit, it also heralded the onset of a broader reckoning, one in which the hidden networks of exploitation that had long operated beneath the polished exterior of our neighborhood would eventually be brought to light, compelling every resident to question the integrity of an institution that had allowed such duplicity to thrive under the guise of order and conformity. And in that reflective silence, as the community slowly began to coalesce around the shared determination to rebuild on the foundations of transparency and justice, I felt a profound personal transformation, a stirring resolve to document every revelation, every tear shed, and every quiet moment of introspection, so that the truth, no matter how painful, could pave the way for genuine reform and a renewed commitment to the values we once held dear. And so, dear reader, as we stand at the crossroads of this tumultuous yet hopeful turning point, I invite you to join us in this journey toward accountability and change, to lend your voice to the call for justice by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing to our channel, for it is only through your support and engagement that we can collectively illuminate the dark corners of corruption and forge a future defined by truth, resilience, and an unwavering dedication to the dignity of every member of our community.